My name is Michael Shackleton. I'm an attorney and politician in Gauteng, South Africa. The short course that I'm presenting is about social cohesion. It's about building understanding across communities to show that people from all walks of life, be it differing race groups, genders, and socio-economic status, can all work together. We can all hold hands and find a way to take our country and the world into the next generation. We all want to live in a world where our families, our friends, our loved ones, our children, and their children's children can live in a prosperous society. There is incredible strength in our diversity, in the notion of working together. Indeed, teamwork always wins.
We live in South Africa, which has an apartheid past, a fractured past, a past of racial and social division, a past which put people of different races into different areas, permitted, or did not permit, in fact, people of different races from being able to marry each other, from even using the same ablution facilities, and from even sitting together on public transport. Laws were in place that prevented races from being one and prevented a cohesive society from being established. There is still skepticism amongst racial groups in South Africa to this day. Perhaps not as bad as before 1994 when apartheid had ended, but I think we're still learning about each other, and there are people that believe, perhaps negative things about other races in our society. And I think a lot of this is formed by things that one learns growing up, but also things that one believes by not being exposed to, let's say, certain communities. If one attends a school, particularly of one race, be it white, black, Indian, colored, maybe you attend an all Jewish school or an all Muslim school, that's not to take away at all from your culture, from your beliefs, from your race, or from your family. But it is possible that you may come out not having full exposure, let's say, to all races across the country. I've benefited, I believe, since my high school days especially, but in spite of being in only co-ed schools, which means, male and female schools, and where, people of all races were present. But let's say within my political career especially, where I serve a political party in South Africa, I've been allocated to a community known as Hammanskraal since 2014. First as a councillor, then as a member of parliament, and now as a member of the legislature. And what I find interesting is that as a white person, I was asked to be the leader for that community politically, for my political party, by activists present in that community. And I think that that's because of trust that I built up over several years by working with people, by establishing genuine friendships, real friendships, real commitment, real honesty, real transparency, and not trying to promote the differences between us, but trying to promote more what makes us similar. As South Africans, there are things that unite all of us at their simplest core. We are all exposed to, for example, receiving power from Eskom and the load shedding that affects this country. Where places like Spar or ShopRite, let's say, Checkers, they're in almost every community in this country. We all have the same president. We all largely know about For example, there are simple things, South African brands, things like Sunlight Liquid, like Colgate toothpaste. But these are perhaps almost silly sounding examples. But the point is that why I'm going to that level to make it almost so silly sounding, so that you can actually see that there is so much that we share in terms of even the way that we raise our children, the fact that we send our children to school, the fact we want our children to be a success in life. If you look at stats of South Africans, people in general don't want to work against each other. It isn't that the majority of white people want to work against black people, or the majority of black people want to work against white people. Most people in this country, in fact, believe in creating a united country where we work together. And social cohesion for me is that. It's about unity, it's about moving forward. But crucially, it does not mean that we are all the same. I am white. I am male. At the time of speaking right now, I am 32 years old, but I turn 33 at month end. That does not make me black and female. It does not make me Indian. It does not make me a black man. It does not make me a colored lady. Does not make me a Muslim man. But there are similarities between us. There are goals. There are things we want to see for ourselves, for our families, for our friends. We are all exposed to largely the same challenges and the same world. And we can work together. We can, it may even sound cheesy or, let's say, corny to some, or a tired old phrase, but we can be united in our diversity. It's been proven in businesses and in teams that where there is diversity, that's where the best ideas come from. That's in fact where the most cohesive teams are formed. Because people learn strength that way. People learn new things about each other, but really people from differing backgrounds bring strengths of their own that others did not have. For example, if we want to address the scourge of gender-based violence in our society, just to use an example, we don't need only women and we don't need only men, but we need strength from both. We do need women to stand up to say, this happened to me. But we need men as well to stand up and support women, but we need men to stand up against each other and make men that do perpetuate gender-based violence outcasts in our society and have lesser value. And maybe I digress slightly, but my point is that really by working together across the board, we can establish great things. Our society is still divided geographically as well. Apartheid did bring about something known as apartheid spatial planning. You'll see it in major cities in this country. There are what they call townships or informal settlements on the outskirts, away from job opportunities, several hours away from where one can even apply for a good opportunity. And that was planned by what was inherently racist legislation. And that does have to be addressed. And we do need to work together in our society to address such challenges and to understand better where all of us are coming from. Black, white, colored, Asian, Indian, male, female, young, old, thin, fat. We need to understand we all have some kind of value to add. And truly working together, we can build a cohesive society. I take on board that this will not happen overnight. It won't happen tomorrow. It won't happen next week. It won't even happen next year. It won't even happen in the next 5 years. But we can build towards this goal, towards this vision. And I hope that our children and our children's children can pursue that goal themselves, but that they can live in a society where we know what it means to have a shared sense of national identity and national pride, where we are a team and we can genuinely call each other our brothers and sisters across the board. I would like to introduce you to two elements: that your perception is limited to what you are exposed to. I will say that again. Your perception is limited to what you are exposed to, and social cohesion versus social coercion. Now, why do I say your perception is limited to what you are exposed to? On its most basic level, let's say, for example, you want to be a lawyer or you want to be an engineer. If you have never studied those things in your life, never seen a textbook, never gone to a class for those things, and miraculously you find yourself in a job as a lawyer or as an engineer, you will find that the people around you will know a great deal more than yourself. People of the olden day would have said the earth was flat. They would have had theories about gods, for example, that did not exist, and so on, as their perception was limited to what they were exposed to and their idea of the world. Say, if you there are theories as well that stories in the Bible, for example, when it referred to the entire planet, could have been simply a single community. For example, in South America, when one refers to Noah's Ark, which is actually a theory written by a Christian author, for interest's sake. But the point here really is that people have judgmental attitudes when it comes to social cohesion, really, or the lack thereof. People do have stereotypes against foreigners, for example, here in South Africa. There are stereotypes where certain foreigners coming from particular countries are perceived to be thieves and are perceived to be unwanted and are perceived to be stealing people's jobs and not adding value and so on. But one will find, from talking to people, from engaging with them, from understanding where it is that they came from, the struggles that they've faced in life, you might find a different outlook, a different perspective being created in your own mind. Social cohesion isn't merely racial, between white people and black people, Indian people, colored people, Asian people, and so on. But it's also between genders, male and female, looking at gender-based violence that has been happening in our country, as well as stereotypes against foreigners. And one can go on in your own mind. Think about, perhaps you grew up around someone that may have been a racist, or you may have heard racist views from a person. And as I've grown through life, I've seen that people that hold these views, I think they were limited by what they were exposed to. We can never excuse racist utterances. We can never say that that's correct or that these are necessarily good people doing this. But I do believe that we can create more cohesion by working with each other. Even now, you can go onto YouTube and you can watch videos where people will talk about how in South Africa in the year 2020, people, whether it's a workplace or a school, will cluster in their own racial groups. Let's say white, Indian, black. You can even see this on university campuses. And it may be from these people interacting more, they can learn more about one another's cultures, develop real friendships, and maybe even serious romantic relationships, so on, if that be their wish in life. Why do I say social cohesion versus social coercion? Well, in our country's constitution, as well as in our criminal laws, there are limitations on freedom of expression, such as you can't be inciting violence, hatred, racism, demeaning a person's reputation, whether directly, merely between, say, you and I, insulting you, or defaming the reputation across the board to many people. Now, the laws do protect your fundamental rights. However, that's merely a beginning point, I believe, in the creation of social cohesion. It does create a situation where, for example, people that have extreme racist views are prohibited from uttering things that are going on in their minds and what they believe, but it doesn't create a genuine situation of social cohesion. And that, I believe, is what we have to work towards. We have to actually work towards an understanding of, okay, let's say, for example, I am a white person, okay? Our country comes from a racially divided past, where in fact a white government, in terms of the laws of the country, segregated all races to live in particular areas. Certain people may look at me and believe that by virtue of the color of my skin, perhaps I am a racist, and I would believe in those types of laws. And I vociferously do not, but only by interacting with me and understanding who is this person, what is he about, and I would say willing to give me the time of day, not judging immediately, merely based on the color of one's skin. There are all kinds of negative, evil stereotypes. Say people do send around jokes, let's say, of, for example, Arab people in the Middle East, joking that these people are terrorists, which is obviously severely harmful, severely stereotypical, and severely unfair. And people have to understand that we all add immense value. I mean, I know people in the Middle East, literally, that are extremely successful entrepreneurs that are developing young people all over the world. And I hope that whoever's listening to this, that you can relate, that you do know people, hopefully, of every race that has some kind of value to add, whether it's their academic prowess, whether it's their work ethic, whether it's how they relate to other people and lift them up and make them be the best that they can be. And that's really what I want to get across in this piece, is that, again, and I'll say it for the third time, your perception is limited to what you are exposed to. It's not enough for me to sit here and say, we should all work together, we should all hold hands, we should all be a team. We have to actively live a life of, I'd say, simultaneously respecting one another, but at the same time looking to actively understand each other. We shouldn't be listening to respond, but we should be listening really to hear what we can learn from one another and take the best attributes from one another and even see how we can incorporate that into our own lives. I promise you, we all do have some kind of value to add. We can all create a positive world and a positive country together. I firmly believe that. I would like to introduce you to the African concept of Ubuntu, meaning that I am because we are, or in the words of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, my humanity is inextricably caught up in yours. I urge you to go to YouTube and to search Desmond Tutu's videos on Ubuntu. Also, I would highly recommend what I believe is the most thorough treatise on Ubuntu available in South Africa, and I'm sure this book would be available around the world on order. The title is Attuned Leadership, and the author is Reuel Khoza, Reuel, that's the first name, The surname is Khoza, Ruel Khoza. He's been quite prominent in business. He's been the chairman of Nedbank. And he shows that you can apply Ubuntu in every aspect of society. In my view, it is in fact a system of leadership, but it is a way by which we can all interact with one another. As Desmond Tutu says, it shows us that one becomes human through other human beings. And he gives a simple example, such as that growing up, you don't learn to walk yourself. You learn to walk by viewing what other people are doing. And you are able to do so through that. Same as with learning basic human speech. Now, Ubuntu tells us to emphasize things like compassion, empathy, which means stepping into another person's shoes and visualizing mentally what it is that they are going through so as to better understand their lives and where they come from. And I think this is ideal in social cohesion and what we're trying to do. If we look at South Africa, we look at key role players in our society, Desmond Tutu amongst them. But as well, Nelson Mandela was a person that strongly put forth the values of Ubuntu. And if we look at his counterpart in achieving the Nobel Peace Prize, F.W. de Klerk, truly these were two men of varying races, varying backgrounds, that came together to create a peaceful transition to our country's democracy. And I think that sets an example of the kind of society we can hope to achieve. It isn't enough, however, in our modern world and in our society, if we want to establish social cohesion, to merely know yourself that you are not a racist, or that you don't hate women, or that you don't hate specific religions. We need to actively call people out that are putting forward such behavior as a person that essentially is not capable of Ubuntu. Also, what happens, and in Ruel Khoza's study of Ubuntu, is that a person can be rejected from a tribe or from a village in the sense of, and there's an African statement around this, but essentially in English, it's that the person is viewed as no longer being human, saying he is no man. And that would be when a person violates the concepts of compassion, of empathy, of working together. So I think that although Ubuntu can be criticized as perhaps being a fluffy concept, as perhaps saying we must all hold hands and business is harsh, politics is harsh, we live in a hard world of realities, but at the same time, we can collectively hold, for example, governments responsible. We can hold racist groups responsible. We can hold people responsible that have stereotypical views against foreigners, because all along these lines, people perpetuating corruption and hampering service delivery for individuals by doing so. All of that, the people are showing that they don't encapsulate or put forward the values of Ubuntu, of understanding our connectedness and the knock-on effects of what we all do and what we are about. Superman on his chest, the S, it doesn't mean super. It stands in their language, which is a foreign, fictitious language, but in any event, it means hope. And that's what I think Ubuntu is. And that's what we all have to stand for and congregate around, is that there has to be hope for a better society. Would you teach your own children to be racist? Would you teach your own children to hate foreigners? Would you teach your own son to hate women? I'd like to believe that no one watching this would want that. And that's, I think, as well, why we have to call out such actions and such behaviors when they happen, because that is not the kind of world we want to create. And if we leave such behavior unchecked, then the kind of society that we would want to see, where we are socially cohesive, where there is a chance of us working together in the face of our diversity, having, for example, 11 official languages in South Africa. Looks like all racial groups and possibly most of the religions in the world here. That kind of society of working together, it will take a step back in terms of being able to be achieved in our lifetimes and several lifetimes thereafter if no one holds one another to account. Ubuntu can be carried over in business, in leadership, in music, in art, in architecture, in law, in government, in sport. Sportsmanship is probably the most obvious. That sportsmanship, there is a culture of decency and dignity that's meant to be there. There is a tale, which is a true tale, where a man from Spain and a man from Kenya were running a race. And the man from Kenya was far ahead of the man from Spain. And the man from Kenya stopped running because he was confused by the signs indicating the end of the race. But the man from Spain, he did not take advantage of this in a way which would see himself win the race. He instead called out to the man who didn't understand it because of his language, and in the end pushed him towards the finish line. And other people asked him, why did you not just run past him, finish the race and win? He said, no, I would never want to win that way. I asked myself, what would my mother think of such a victory? And I think that's the kind of behavior we have to keep in mind in our own lives. Ubuntu, to me, as I said at the beginning, it's a system of leadership. And I think you can quickly see this by sitting back and asking yourself the question, a boss that you either have worked for or that you do work for. Ask yourself, this is a person that that's given you a tough time. Ask yourself, would you still follow that person if there was no money involved, if there was no employment contract? And I think in many cases, the answer would be no. And that's the difference between a boss and a leader, and the difference between exercising Ubuntu and exercising compassion. Also through the system of Ubuntu, one looks at attempting to get the very best out of others, not dragging them down, not insulting them. In fact, it was this book, Attuned Leadership on Ubuntu, which got me through a very difficult work year of my life in 2012, where I did not feel that my supervisor acted with Ubuntu. But I saw from Ruben Khoza's book and his treatise on Ubuntu how human beings are supposed to interact with one another, how we are supposed to treat each other, and really how we are supposed to build each other up, to exercise empathy in a difficult world, and how we should show that we are humane. There are so many things that we can call on to prove and indicate that we have a shared humanity amongst us. There is so much more that unites us than what divides us. Please keep this in mind. Remember the book Attuned Leadership. Go onto YouTube and search for Desmond Tutu on Ubuntu. There are many powerful and relevant reasons for us working together across society, in fact, across every society. There have always been things in history where simply doing it together is the only way. Whether it's building a shopping mall, creating train tracks, building a road, even building the most basic building. Often these would need more than one person. It would need some kind of team. Here in South Africa, we accept that we are either the most unequal society in the world, which according to the Gini coefficient is highly possible, but a more, let's say, lenient reference is that maybe we're the second most unequal country in the world compared to Brazil. We cannot ignore these inequalities. We can't ignore that there is a large gap between rich and poor people in our country. We can't ignore that many people live on the outskirts of opportunities, live very far away from being able to even apply for jobs even anywhere remotely near to where they themselves reside. We can't ignore that there are thousands of pit toilets in schools all over our country, and we cannot ignore failing healthcare. We cannot ignore that people don't really have adequate education across the board to unlock the opportunities to give their families a better life. And some people might say, therefore, how can you say that we can move forward in a socially cohesive manner? The thing is that all of these problems require joint solutions. They require people teaming up, working together, and finding out what the answers are. It depends on people joining hands across racial groups and saying, you know what, this is actually the path that we need to forge together. And it requires agreement. I can sit here and say I have particular solutions for addressing our nation's imbalances. Anyone watching this, you might sit at home and say to yourself, I have these solutions. But ultimately, what has to happen is that we would need agreement across society. We would need legislative bodies like parliament, legislatures to maybe even enact different laws. We would need buy-in from companies and so on and so forth to take our nation forward. And all of these things require strongly working together. We need to appreciate the strength in our diversity. What makes our country and life, even basic entertainment, have value is the fact that we are all different. A musician that plays a guitar has something different to offer than a person that dances. An Olympic swimmer has something different to offer than a soccer player. A doctor has something different to offer than a lawyer, and so on and so forth. I think you can see where I'm going with this. And ultimately, there's almost a coming together between our individual interests and the community. They, in my view, they're not mutually exclusive concepts. As individuals, we all have fundamental rights and freedoms to not be racially abused, to not be arbitrarily deprived of property, and we do have the right to some kind of basic services, even though those are progressively realized in terms of our constitution. But we all contribute towards the larger community and the larger society in our own unique ways. We have extensive religious rights in South Africa, rights which are not afforded to some in other countries, where if you do not comply with the religious laws of that particular state, you don't comply with that particular religion, you can suffer severe consequences, even death. Why I say this is here we can even decide not to belong to any religion and not to express any particular faith in a higher being. But what does unite religions across the board seems to be a type of golden rule that speaks to respect for one's fellow human being, for empathy, for stepping into the shoes of your fellow human beings, to look at what are they going through, what sufferings and travails have they faced in life. And that is a very useful tool that we can all take forward even if you happen to be an atheist yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean that only religions can provide a code of personal ethics, but it is a useful tool, as I'm saying, and something again that unites people across the board, that people are united by shared values, shared beliefs, and shared principles. It will take time to forge a sense of national identity, but ultimately, through creating social cohesion slowly, carefully, methodically, on purpose, and with a clear plan, we can ultimately achieve that goal. Barack Obama says that the goal of every generation should be to make the world a better place for future generations. With that in mind, it has to be incumbent upon us to work towards manufacturing a higher level of social cohesion in our country. It is difficult. It certainly will not be easy. There are racial incidents that occur on an almost daily basis in our country. We hear of incidents of police brutality. It is a challenge in this country, having so many religions, having 11 official languages, having seemingly every racial group which exists in this world. But we have been given strong examples by leaders that work together to end apartheid, that we can move forwards together. We don't need hate. Hate will not work to address the serious inequalities and disadvantages facing many in our nation. And if you're watching this even as a person living in another country, I urge you to take these examples and truly looking at how reconciliation did occur in South Africa, to see how you can apply that within your own nation, within your own company, even within your own family and the society in which you reside. We do have a social and moral responsibility to lift each other up. Having a shared sense of national identity, even a shared sense of being human. You can see, for example, if your neighbour's child is struggling to obtain a decent education, that we can sit around the table of ideas and establish ways, agree on laws together that will uplift others across our society. And even at times when one can afford, whether it's your personal time through, in this case, for example, tutoring, or even financially, one can do something to uplift others. And that's the thing. Regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of age, we need to see and understand that we all face similar challenges. We are all born as human beings. We die as human beings. We face the same type of challenges in many situations. The same diseases will ultimately result in our demise. We travel on the same roads. We all want to have a secure life where our children can be safe, where we can provide for our families. And I think understanding these basic concepts, we can come together, we can work together, and we can understand and empathize with each other. The key word here for me is definitely empathy. We need to step into the shoes mentally of people across the board, regardless of race, regardless of nationality, regardless of background, to understand that there is so much that we share, and to understand that it is incumbent upon us, with a shared sense of connectedness, with a shared sense of interdependence, that we can and should ultimately be working to uplift one another, even if it is in small ways. I thank you.